Hi, everybody. Welcome back to English 90. This is our class for Wednesday, the 17th, where I wanted to talk a little bit more about grammar, and I also wanted to talk about some upcoming assignments that are addressing the 5 paragraph essay, which is what this semester has been gearing towards, as well as talking about next semester's English class. But I thought I'd start with grammar. And basically, I wanted to talk about pronouns, a part of speech that we didn't necessarily discuss in class. That's on page 530 to 535. Now, a pronoun, it takes the place of a noun. And you'll remember that a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. So pronouns are words like he, she, they, we. And basically, it's supposed to replace a noun, a person, place, thing, or idea, so that you don't have to keep repeating yourself over and over again. You want to make sure that you are being very clear when you are using pronouns. So one of the things that oftentimes happens is that individuals will use a pronoun, but there is no noun in the sentence to indicate what the pronoun is replacing. Usually the noun is probably either assumed or it's in a previous sentence, but remember, each sentence must be able to stand on its own. So if you were to read each individual unit, that sentence should make sense. So take the example that I've given you below in the first section. Miriam was annoyed when they failed her car at inspection. Miriam was annoyed when they failed her car at inspection. And this is incorrect because the question is, who is they? They is replacing a noun, some sort of a person, a place, a thing, and or idea. Or you can also say something that would also be incorrect. Peter told Alan he was unhappy. Now, the problem with this sentence is that we have two possibilities for he, either Peter or Alan. So, he who? Was it Peter told Alan that Peter was unhappy, or did Peter tell Alan that Alan was unhappy? So, both of these are incorrect. So, the way to fix the first one would basically be to indicate who they is. Miriam was annoyed when the mechanics failed her car on inspection, for instance. And now this gives us an idea of who the they is supposed to be. Or Peter told Alan was unhappy. So this gives us an idea that Peter is telling Alan that Alan himself is unhappy. Now, adjectives and adverbs. This is on page 545 to 549. These are descriptive words. Adjectives describe nouns and pronouns. So saying something like, Sophia is a wise woman. And the noun is woman. But wise is the description of the kind of woman that she is. Adverbs will describe verbs, or sometimes they will also describe adjectives. And they oftentimes end in the word or end in ly. So for instance, the example I'm giving you below in section 2. The father gently hugged his child. So basically, we could take out that descriptor there, that adverb, gently, and say the father hugged his child. But gently is the adverb that describes how he's doing the hugging. He gently hugged the child. Now, adjectives and adverbs are particularly important, not just so that you can be detailed in your writing, but you need to make sure that you are putting these words in the correct place in sentences. And most of us, when we speak, do not necessarily put the words in the correct locations, and we just sort of assume that everybody understands what we're saying. But of course, you don't want to do that in your writing. You want to be as clear as possible in your writing. So you can have something called a modifier, which is a descriptive word, like an adjective or an adverb, that is misplaced. It is put in the wrong place in the sentence, so it's describing the wrong thing. It is the incorrect placement of descriptions if you have a misplaced modifier. This is in section 3 of the notes below, and I wanted to give you the example. And this is something that I myself say all the time. The phone almost rang 5 times. The phone almost rang 5 times. But because the word almost, the descriptor, is next to the word rang, what I am saying, which is incorrect, is that the phone almost rang, but it didn't ring at all. That's incorrect. The correct version, as you can see in the notes below, is that the phone rang almost 5 times. That you want the word almost before the word 5. Because what you're saying is that the phone rang 4.5 times, let's say. But if you've got the word almost, not before the word 5, but before the word rang, what you're saying is that the phone almost rang, but it didn't ring at all. Again, we do this all the time in our speaking, but again, you want to make sure that you are not misplacing your modifiers, which is the name of that particular mechanical mistake, when you are writing. Or you can say something like, I discovered a plant that was dying in the greenhouse. That would be correct. But saying something like, I discovered a plant in the greenhouse that was dying is incorrect, because that was dying is next to the word greenhouse. So what you've just said, and you can see this in the notes below, in the incorrect version, is that the greenhouse was dying. I know that isn't what you meant. I know you meant that the plant was dying, not the greenhouse. So basically, you want to say, I discovered a plant that was dying. In other words, dying is next to the plant, not necessarily next to the greenhouse. So it's a minor error, which is why I'm not talking about it at the beginning of the semester. I'm talking about it now. But it's an important error. And there is something called a dangling modifier, that descriptor isn't misplaced, it's just dangling at the beginning of the sentence, and we are never told what it's supposed to be describing. Again, usually it's assumed, but you can't assume anything in your writing. You want to be as clear as possible. So the description is in the beginning of the sentence with no following descriptor. So here's an example of how it would be incorrect, and this is in section 4. While studying, my dog slept. While studying, my dog slept. And I know what you're trying to say, that while you were studying, let's say, or while somebody else was studying, the dog slept. But it never indicates you or somebody else. So what you've just said is that your dog was studying and fell asleep, even though I know that's not what you meant. What you would need to say, what would be correct, and again, you can see this in section 4, is while I studied, my dog slept. So now it's clear who's doing the studying. But while you're saying while studying, and then what comes immediately afterwards is my dog, the only conclusion you can draw from the way that sentence is written is that it is your dog that was studying, because you didn't specify that it was you or someone else. So I wanted to move on to the 5-paragraph essay, which is usually considered to be the basic paper that a student would write. And we've been gearing towards this all semester long. We began by trying to determine what a paragraph is and how a paragraph could be well written with depth and detail. And then your second writing assignment, which I'm working on, and I know I'm a little bit behind with some of my grading, but I intend to catch up this weekend with attendance questions, and also with some of your journals, in particular your journals, and your last writing assignment, the 3 paragraphs. When we moved from 1 paragraph to 3 paragraphs, I wanted to focus on writing a well-written introduction that gives the topic as well as your thesis, the position on the subject, as well as a well-written conclusion that gives a sense of closure. Again, I'll get those back to you soon. And what I suggested is that you could put your evidence in one middle body paragraph, and I had suggested 3 pieces of evidence as minimum. So if you were go to the natural conclusion of that, if you were to take each piece of evidence in the middle and give it its own paragraph, rather than putting it all into one big paragraph, then you would have the 5-paragraph essay, where paragraph 1 would be your introduction. That's where you give your topic and your thesis. And then you would have body paragraph 1, and that would be evidence, your first piece of evidence that you would develop. And then you would have body 2, and that would be the second piece of evidence that you develop in an entire paragraph. Remember, then that means that you have a topic sentence that summarizes what the paragraph is about. And then you've got multiple pieces of evidence with details in the body of that paragraph. And then you've got a concluding sentence that gives that paragraph some closure. And then you've got body evidence number 3. And then finally, you've got your concluding paragraph. So if you were to write well-developed paragraphs, we're probably talking about a 2-page paper here, which is usually one of the shorter papers that you might be asked to write in college, to write a 2-page paper about something. So that's basically what we have been gearing towards. And not only will this be your 3rd writing assignment when it comes up, and in looking at the syllabus, I might need to give a little bit of an extension on that. We'll see how things go with dates, but I'll be giving you that assignment in the next class or 2. But I also wanted to talk about our final exam, because there is a final exam for this class. And basically what you're going to be asked to do is to write an essay of several paragraphs in length. In other words, that's code for 5 or more paragraphs. You can always write more. That's the difference between a 2-page paper and a 20-page paper. Both papers, 2 pages and 20 pages, would have an introduction and a conclusion. The difference is in the body. How many paragraphs do you write? 3, 13, 30? And obviously, the more paragraphs you've got, the more pieces of evidence, the greater the length of the paper. But for your final exam, I'm going to give you 3 questions and ask you to choose one. They will be based on your own personal experiences and beliefs, so it isn't something that's going to require any kind of outside knowledge. And you will have, because it will be during our final exam period at the ending of the semester, 24 hours in which to complete that writing assignment. The idea is that you can do 2 kinds of writing assignments. That was the whole point of this class. The first is the writing assignment where you've got multiple days or even weeks to work on it, where you can refine it and develop it. But also you can write within the moment. If we were meeting in person, you would have 2 hours to take that exam. But since we're not meeting in person, I'm going to give you 24 hours. And I'm quite aware that that piece of writing will not be nearly as well developed or detailed as something that you have a longer amount of time to write, but you still should be able to communicate in both ways. So for instance, if you were in the workplace, your employer might ask you to write a report and you might have several weeks to write it. But if you're in the workplace, your employer might also ask you to write it on email, and you might have just an hour to write it. So I want you to be able to do both, in effect. So in terms of the final, I thought what I could do for Monday's class that's coming up on the 22nd is give you a practice final. So this is not the final exam, but this will be very similar to what you will experience in the final. So you'll get an idea of the kinds of questions that I would ask. Obviously, I'm not going to ask the same questions I would ask in the practice final. And that will be your attendance question for that particular class, that you'll have 24 hours to respond by, rather than writing on the discussion form, sending your response to me via email, and I'll have this indicated in our Monday class. And basically, I'm asking you to write several paragraphs in response to one of the 3 essay questions that I'm going to be giving you. So in other words, this is a kind of trial run, and it won't be graded. It'll just count for your attendance for the day. And again, when I say several paragraphs, or when any teacher talks in that manner, really what they're talking about is 5 or more paragraphs. Unless you're told otherwise, the minimum for a writing assignment is 5 paragraphs and probably a lot longer. So I'll talk a little bit more about this on Monday, but I wanted to end today's class by talking about English 101, which is the next level English class that occurs after this particular class. This particular course, and if you're taking also the reading component of that's also offered, both of these classes are supposed to prepare you for English 101. That's the college level English class that just about every student has to take at GCC. So the idea behind English 101 is that you've got some background in grammar and mechanics and writing paragraphs and essays. That's what this class was about, was to make sure that you had that knowledge so that when you go into English 101, you could talk about more in depth the kinds of writing assignments that you will be expected to do in other college classes, whether it be English or other disciplines. And that means probably starting with something like a 2-page paper, which is about 5 paragraphs, and moving your way into a research paper that could be several paragraphs long. That's what you do in English 101. And what we always recommend at GCC is once you've begun taking an English or a math class, that you continue until you have satisfied your requirement. So while you are meeting with your advisors, and I hope that you've had the opportunity to reach out to your advisor, that you are planning to take an English class next semester, because you don't want too much time to lapse between this class and your English class, because you don't want to forget things. And it's the same with your math as well. So I encourage you to take English 101 next semester. And you can see that there are a number of options with a number of teachers for English 101 that are offered at many different times a day, that are offered online, that are offered in a hybrid format, partially online and partially in person. So there are lots of different ways that you can take that particular course. So I thought that would be today's attendance question, is about English 101, because that basically has been what we've been preparing for all semester long. So our attendance question, which will be due on Thursday at 10 a.m., and that'll be on the 18th, Do you have any questions about English 101? And if so, what are they? And I'd be happy to answer them for you. If you don't have any questions, just say no, and then that'll satisfy your requirement. So next class, we'll talk a little bit more about the 5 paragraph essay and practice finals. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well, and we will continue on next class. Take care. Bye-bye.